Hello and welcome to this Astranti video. My name is Jordan and today I'm going to be running you through our industry analysis video for the SCS exam for the February 2020 sitting. Now of course today we are dealing with the coffee industry and more specifically we are dealing with Shinepodd, our Midland based premium coffee manufacturer. Before we go any further, I would like to explain this video is designed to be an accompaniment to the main industry document that we produce. So my aim here is to pick out some of the key topics, key trends, and key examples that I think will be of particular use to you in your exam. This video is not designed to replace the actual industry document itself, so we do recommend that you use both these products in conjunction with each other. So as usual, at SCS level in this exam, you are required to take on the role of a senior manager in a particular Prescene company, which in this case is Shinepodd. As you can see on the screen, your main role is to report directly to the board and advise on special projects and strategic matters. You are expected to provide logical business advice as if you're an employee in this industry. And so this industry pack is designed to give you much needed context as to the industry you'll be role-playing in. So now that we've established your position in the company, what I want to do now is start by looking at the history of the coffee industry. And I think this will be useful for several reasons. For one, it'll provide context on the modern coffee industry and it'll also help us pick out some key trends that we can translate to the modern industry, but also to our Prescene company, Shinepodd. So, all you realistically need to know for the history is that, broadly speaking, the coffee industry is quite old. It's been around since the 15th century and it has had continual growth over the past few centuries. Coffee is a historically and culturally important product, and because of this, it is broadly a stable industry, as it is unlikely that the demand for coffee is going to decrease anytime soon in the near future. Now, coffee is more than just the bean that it's produced from. There are of course multiple steps to the whole process, from growing to picking, all the way down to just brewing the coffee. Now, in terms of growth, Brazil has historically had a monopolistic control. And this will play into the later part of the industry pack where we look at where coffee is grown and who the biggest distributors are. So while the monopoly no longer exists, Brazil still is still a popular location for the growth and distribution of coffee. As far as actually processing and brewing the coffee goes, there is instant coffee and ground coffee. Now, instant coffee is the one we're most interested in because it was a precursor to what we're going to be discussing, which is the coffee pod. So, instant coffee came into production around 1938 with the introduction of Nescafe. And over the next decade, instant coffee production was further refined to make it a far cheaper alternative and convenient alternative than ground coffee. Now onto the present. With the popularity of instant coffee came the desire to have coffee that tasted as delicious as ground coffee, but as easy to brew as instant. This is the result of the booming popularity of coffee shops at the time, like Starbucks. This is when the single-serve coffee machine was introduced in 1990. Now, alongside the coffee machine came the single-serve coffee pod. And the coffee pod allowed a person to instantly brew a single cup of coffee in their own home in a similar fashion to how they would receive a cup of coffee at a coffee shop. Their invention in the 1990s has led to the coffee pod market, and the market has continued to grow and proliferate across the world since its inception in the 1990s. So how can we apply this to the Prescene? So, Shinepodd was founded at the turning point of coffee production in the 1980s. It was founded after Nescafe, but Shinepodd had the advantage as being a follower in the coffee industry. Now, as a follower, Shinepodd could look at Nescafe and its other competitors and identify what its customers were missing. So this is the advantage of knowing your history, of knowing who your competitors are and being able to improve and take advantage of what they got wrong in the first place. So as we know, instant coffee was already widely popular, But the founder of Shinepodd identified that customers also wanted to create an espresso-style coffee, but without the complicated machinery that came with it. So that's when they invented the SD Pod system, so that customers could produce an espresso-style coffee with ease. So that's a brief history of the coffee industry and how it can broadly apply to Shinepodd. So now we're going to move on and discuss the various products that tend to be popular in the coffee industry and how these apply to Shinepodd. So there are broadly 5 primary products that the coffee industry offers customers. Now, we'll be focusing on the coffee pod primarily in this industry pack, but we will cover the instant coffee and ground coffee markets as they play an important role in the popularity and the general industry trends that we're currently seeing in the coffee industry. As for direct competitors, there are a wide variety with different specialisms. So we have Nestle, who's one of the largest competitors, and they not only do coffee, but they do confectionery, pet foods, a wide variety of products. But then we have Keurig Dr. Pepper, who was formerly Keurig Green Mountain, which was a specialist coffee company in the same vein as Shinepodd. However, recently they've had a merger, and so now they also produce coffee, soft drinks, tea, and juice. There are other companies as well, so we have Lavazza, who's a specialist Italian coffee manufacturer, and of course other companies that are relevant competitors are Costa and Starbucks. While these two are not necessarily manufacturers of coffee, generally speaking, they are competition because, of course, it's a choice between buying a coffee machine and making coffee at home or going out to a coffee shop and buying coffee in the store instead. So let's move on to some product trends. So the global coffee industry is valued at $400 billion, and it is expected to have a compound annual growth rate of 5.8%. On a smaller scale, with regards to the UK, this industry is valued at 1.2 billion as of 2019, and it is categorized as a growing industry, which is characterized by the intense competition and investment in new product development. So let's get on to the main product of this case study, which is the coffee pod. So what are the trends for coffee pods in the UK? Well, 20% of the total revenue generated by the coffee industry is from coffee pods, while the remaining 60% is primarily dominated by ground and instant coffee products, and the last 20% are various other coffee products like extracts or decaffeinated coffee, which we're not going to pay much attention to. The main figures that you need to pay attention to are the 20% and the 60% in the UK. So, coffee pods have been incredibly popular in the UK, and according to Mintel, coffee pod sales have increased from 58 million to 184 million between 2012 and 2016. That is a massive growth in sales given the time frame, so they're clearly becoming more and more popular as time goes on. Now, in order for a coffee pod to work, you also need a coffee pod compatible machine. And in the UK, it is estimated that 28% of people own these machines. Now, there are 2 ways of usually acquiring these machines. One is through your standard retail purchase. The second is a unique development by Nespresso, where you can now purchase a machine through a subscription-based model, where instead you pay £1 for a machine and then only pay for the coffee pods. This is an interesting business strategy by Nespresso, and one that we'll be looking into later in our industry examples. Now, one reason for why Nespresso have decided to create a subscription model is because there is a barrier to entry for coffee pods, because you actually need to purchase a machine. So of course it's more appealing because the upfront cost is smaller. Another thing to note about these machines is that they tend to include proprietary technology to prevent competitor coffee pods from being used in each other's machines. Now, there has been a relatively recent development where Nespresso did do that, but now no longer do because of an antitrust lawsuit with the French authorities. But that is generally the strategy that coffee pod manufacturers have used, where they make the pods incompatible with competitor machines. So where we're seeing the most product development is not in the machines itself, but actually the coffee pod. Due to the pods being a mixture of materials, which include aluminium and plastic, there's been a concerted effort to make these pods more biodegradable and recyclable. This is because, of course, coffee pods, because of their popularity, it means that there's much more plastic waste now in the environment. And so some businesses are looking into making their pods compostable instead. Other product developments include the use of bags. So when brewing ground coffee, instead of using a filter, you would instead buy a ground coffee bag, which is similar to a tea bag, and that can be used to brew a hot or cold coffee without a filter. Lastly, there's also been a recent introduction of ready-to-drink coffee that has been promoted by Coca-Cola under the Costa brand. This specific market is also seeing considerable growth, with a compound annual growth rate of 8.5%, and it is likely that this could provide a bit of competition for the coffee pod market, as ready-to-drink coffee is in some places more popular, such as in Asia. Now, how can we apply this to the case study? So, based on the Prescene, we know that Shinepodd boasts 37 different varieties of coffee. Now, there is not much information besides this to go on about what their product breakdown is, but what we do know is that they do sell coffee pods, they sell a lot of them, and they also sell the SD pod systems, albeit they don't make them themselves, but they do sell them under their brand. Now, what the Prescene does break down, however, are the different kinds of coffee beverages that consumers tend to consume. So, of course, we have ground coffee, which is viewed as tasty and capable of being prepared in different ways. Instant coffee is the opposite, where it's faster and cheaper than ground coffee, as we've already established. But some customers find instant coffee to be inferior, so there's always a bit of controversy over, do you choose ground or do you choose instant? Coffee shops, however, are the ones that provide the highest quality cups of coffee, and it is the coffee shops that has helped promote the coffee pod industry, because people have gotten used to drinking these high quality coffees, which they also want to drink at home and not just at a coffee shop. Now, as the case study suggests, coffee pods provide the best of all three worlds. Coffee pods can provide a delicious coffee shop coffee quickly and with a more compact and affordable machine. And as a result of Shinepodd recognizing this desire, this gap in the market in the 1990s, they have been able to grow rapidly. Then, of course, we have the competitors. Now, Shinepodd's premium product will compete with both the confectionery giants like Nestle and specialized coffee producers such as Jacobs Dough's Egberts. Now, to start with, Shinepodd's coffee pods are directly competing against other coffee-related products, which includes instant and ground coffee, hence why we're interested in those two as well. Another way that Shinepodd try to differentiate themselves from the competition is in the way they build their own machines. So, as it states in the Prescene, that Shinepodd also builds its machines so that competitor coffee pods do not work in it. And so that is how it tends to differentiate itself from a technical standpoint, albeit it is not particularly consumer friendly, and Nespresso did pay the price for it when the French authorities decided that it wasn't consumer friendly. Based on the case study information alone, Shinepodd only manufactures the coffee pods, and so the business does not have a diverse range of products other than the variety of coffee that it sells. So, to prevent the business being affected by changes in the coffee pod market, Shinepodd should realistically consider expanding into alternative products. For example, Shinepodd could change the way it sells its coffee by creating a subscription model similar to Nespresso. This way it ensures that there's a steady stream of income every month, and they could also perhaps expand into other hot drinks like tea and not just focus on coffee. With all that being said, there is, however, little information in the Prescene about how Shinepodd expects to grow against its competitors in the context of its product offering. So, Final chapter now, industry examples. So one example we're all familiar with already is the Clooney effect. Now, as explained earlier in the industry analysis, George Clooney is an Nespresso brand ambassador, and his involvement with Nespresso has helped increase brand awareness of Nespresso across various countries in Europe. Brand awareness across these countries is roughly between 17 and 75% as a result of these advertisements. How is this relevant to the Prescene? Well, the success of different types of coffee is dependent on the brand. Whether the coffee is perceived as a premium or cheap is dependent on how the brand is perceived. Celebrity endorsement is one way of making sure that the brand perception, the communication of it is consistent. So, how have Shinepodd used celebrity endorsement? Well, as with George Clooney, they use George Negrato as their brand ambassador, so it's clear from the Prescene that customers have responded positively to this initiative, and so just goes to show that for spreading brand awareness, celebrity endorsement is vitally important. On the legal end of the coffee industry, we have the proprietary nature of coffee pods. Now, as you may recall, I said that the French antitrust authorities actually challenged Nestlé that it was abusing its position in the market by making sure that only coffee pods that it allowed would work in its Nespresso machines. Now, Nestlé did concede to the authorities and allowed third-party manufacturers to start producing Nespresso pods all across the world. This, of course, is a massive loss for Nespresso as far as its control of the market goes, but a positive for the consumer. Now, as for the relevance, of course, in an effort to differentiate each other, single-serve coffee machine makers tend to design their machines so that only their branded pods work in them. And as for Shinepodd, what this means is that if Midlands government were to see that Shinepodd were abusing its position, it could tell Shinepodd that it has to make sure that other competitor coffee pods work in its machines, and that could result in a massive loss of market control for Shinepodd. As a result of the competitive nature of the coffee industry, it has now become common practice to actually either merge or acquire companies, or in this case, form a strategic alliance. For Nestle and Starbucks, they have teamed up so that way then Nestle is given exclusive rights to sell Starbucks branded coffee products on their Nespresso machines. As a result, both Nestle and Starbucks get to expand their brands globally, and through this deal, Starbucks will be able to leave the confines of its coffeehouse market, and Nestle can attract the Starbucks lovers to its coffee machines. Now, based on the information in the Prescene, Shinepodd does not currently have any strategic alliances with major coffee competitors. However, if Shinepodd were to ally with a coffeehouse brand like Starbucks and Nestle, it could potentially reach an even wider audience. Partnering with a big coffee shop brand like Starbucks could raise awareness for Shinepodd's coffee pods, as people will look to produce coffee shop quality coffee in their own homes. Thank you for listening to this video on the industry analysis. Good luck in your exams and have a good day.